So you want to make a mega base. Maybe you're thinking something this big, or maybe even bigger. Either way, you should always have a plan. Because I didn't really have a plan when I started making this. I mean, I had a rough idea, but I didn't have like a solid actual plan on how everything was going to look. My entire plan was just make a big hole in the ground to bedrock and put a guardian farm in the middle. And I followed that rough idea pretty well, but as you'll notice, I am not even close to bedrock. So in this video, while I talk, I'm just gonna do some mining, I think. Usually I would have some background gameplay, but like I need to get this done eventually. This hole is not gonna mine itself. But yeah, what are some things that you should expect before you make such a big project, you know? What are the things that most people, or at least I, didn't think about that I probably should have? Well, I think it's pretty clear that one of my biggest issues was scale. I think the proportions would have worked themselves out um, once the scale was proper, but oh my goodness. I did not understand how much work getting all the way to bedrock would be. I think I was actually digging this trench when I realized it's really far down, actually. And from that point on, I basically just settled it being a, like, Y37 or something. And don't get me wrong, the base still looks cool, it just doesn't have the same effect I was going for. There's a reason why this project took me a year and a half to complete, even though I was playing on this world a lot. And I've got to say, it comes down to the scale. I was just not prepared to mine all of this. Like I was planning on TNTing some of it, but all the bits with the ocean I was gonna mine out because I didn't want the TNT to break the walls and flood a bunch of it. It would have just been a huge pain, I think. Maybe it wouldn't have been, and I was worrying for nothing, but just to be on the safe side, I manually mined out pretty much all of it. There was a small little section where I did experiment with some TNT, but it was just never gonna work. Having a big project is one thing, but having a big project that you aren't prepared for is a whole other thing. While this project is mostly just for aesthetics, or I guess maybe lack thereof, it's not the most like beautiful thing ever. And for one, it is difficult to like have a huge level of detail on such a large project. And the relatively unimpressive construction of it all is just also down to scale. But something I think I did do good in terms of planning is actually planning an endpoint. Like you've seen those bases. You watch Hermitcraft maybe. I think a good example of this that's kind of comparable is Brian's Hermitcraft Season 6 base. Basically, for those of you who don't know, it was a big base in the ocean, and at least for me, it felt like he could keep on building. Like if that world was kept up, like, it was pretty much infinitely expandable, but at some point it did have to be finished. Not to say that it's not a good thing to add on stuff later, like what happened with that base when it was in its pretty much finished state, but you should have a plan going into it, a rough idea of what the finished project is going to look like. And I think both with that base and with this base, that was pretty good. I had a rough idea on how it was going to look. Besides the fact that it doesn't go all the way down to bedrock, I pretty much followed that plan perfectly. Some of the elements, like having little cubby holes in the wall to like store stuff in, doesn't work because this isn't actually my base. I have a cave base where I base everything out of, but if I didn't have that, this base would have been perfect. If you watched my world tour a few months ago, you would have seen that over here is where that first cubby that I've made, and only cubby I've made. It's just nestled here. Oh, die. It's just nestled here in one of the, not corners, but at one of the segments. Um, and it does have stuff. This is my storage cubby, or what was planted in my storage cubby. I still use this as bulk storage, but it's kind of messy nowadays. But I'm getting sidetracked. That's not part of this really. It's just I did have a plan. I tried to stick to it, but then I was like, oh, this other plan's a lot better. I am starting to ramble a little bit, but I want it to be mentioned that part of the reason why I chose concrete powder as the floor is because in the case that I want to expand it downward, which I definitely do, I'm just not gonna move any of it down until I get all the way down to bedrock. But if I ever do get to that point, I'll be able to mine this layer of stone, and all the concrete powder will just fall right down. I even have this little platform I can stand on when that happens. If that ever happens, I don't know. It's kind of just a wish right now. Like the original construction of it was part of the planned structure, and then I scaled back, and then expanding downward wasn't really part of it. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll actually expand further down. But yeah, planning a final stage or a final look of what it's gonna of what the base is gonna be or the structure, that's really important because if you don't do that, then you can't like I don't know. At least for me, the whole thing that well originally the whole thing that made me want to make this is just the sheer scale. Because the original purpose of this structure was to be an optimized guardian farm. That also looked really cool. I've got the despawn sphere of 120 block radius circle, or I guess sphere, but the sphere fits inside this cylinder, okay, so it works. And then it would block all hostile mob spawns, so only guardians could spawn. And while I haven't actually completely mob-proofed everything, I have made substantial progress, and, you know, every time I light up a cave, it's getting closer to its original goal. And with that being said, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye. It's a much shorter fall than I thought.